Lovely. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I'm going to start with an introduction to Mothers Can. So, hello everyone. I'm Lindsay Wingate, and alongside Sophie Marple, we are co-directors of Mothers Can. Mothers Can is a network of mums across the UK working together and supporting each other to take collective action in our communities. We are built by mums for mums, and we offer the flexibility needed to enable mums to do this work in a supportive and meaningful way. We are a volunteer-run organisation and rely on the participation and engagement of those mums who get involved to build and grow what we do. We exist because we believe that when people come together in small committed groups, they can build the power to make change. We do this by building the confidence, leadership and community organising skills of mums so that they can become grassroots climate leaders and work to make change happen in their communities, such as schools, workplaces and local neighbourhoods. Central to this is building relationships and relational power, which is built through our most powerful tool, the conversation. The podcast, Screw This, Let's Try Something Else, which Matt and Jess will be telling us about this evening, tells stories which do exactly these things and uses these community organising skills. They bring people together and they talk about what would benefit their communities and then build power to make positive change happen. As a network, we want to engage as many mums as possible at whatever stage of the journey you are at to taking collective action. So if you're completely new to taking action with others and community organising, or are already active in your community, you are all welcome. For those that feel like they need to build the confidence to do this, we offer our free Anxiety to Action training course twice a year. The course creates a supportive training and peer learning space which encourages mothers across the UK to join us to learn about collective action and how to use community organising to make a real and lasting impact in their communities. Sometimes one of the main reasons mums join us on the course is because they want to find their people and connect. The course creates a safe and supportive space which enables collective confidence to feel like they can do something. Beyond the course, you would continue to be part of a like-minded group through deep and meaningful support through the facilitation of our national network, where we share successes, challenges, inspirational stories and ideas. You will also receive one-to-one support to help keep you accountable and keep going with your goals. Personally, for me, being a part of Mothers Can has been a huge journey. From being a mum and feeling alone about how I feel about the world, to being introduced to an amazing group of mums, all doing inspirational things, leading change and having their voices heard. I truly have found my tribe at Mothers Can. I've since built the confidence and developed skills to change my career, become chair of my daughter's school PTA and co-direct this incredible organisation. So if you like the sound of that, what can you do next? Well, you could join our mailing list if you're not on it already. We send newsletters 4 times a year with inspirational stories from the mums in our networks, as well as upcoming opportunities and news such as these speaker sessions. You can also find the details of our upcoming Anxiety to Action course in October. You'll hear more about this later from one of our recent cohort members, Emma. Or you could send us an email if you'd like to know more or you would like to support us. So welcome to Mothers Can. We hope to hear from you following this event and so that we can make change happen together. Thanks for listening to the introduction. I will make sure that the things that I've mentioned about what you can do next are in the chat in just a moment. But a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you so much, Sophie, putting the details in the chat. Thank you. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get going, and I hand over to Matt and Jess. If you can stay on mute during Matt and Jess's session, that would be great. You can put questions in the chat and we'll monitor that during the Q&A session. Matt and Jess will be talking for about 20 to 25 minutes and then we'll be asking them those questions. Right, so all that's left for me to do is I'm going to introduce you to Matt Golding, the creator and host, and Jess Lyne, the producer of my current favourite podcast, Screw This, Let's Try Something Else. I just think the name itself is just fantastic. Last year, Matt and his co-presenter Miriam set off around the UK to find ordinary neighbourhoods doing something extraordinary. If there was ever a podcast that aligned with the Mothers Can approach, this is it. And we're so excited to hear from Matt and Jess this evening. So I'll hand over to you both.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. And I think first off, we're going to play a video. Sophie, are you able to play the video? This is like a snapshot of what the podcast has done. And we've tried to, I had to make this while I had the flu, and it's done in the style of the A Team. So, apologies, but it's hopefully more fun than a dry video.
Actually, yeah, give me a minute
Okay.
because I've just managed to, obviously, I said earlier that oh, here we go.
Okay.
In 2026, a special ops storytelling team turned their backs on endless bad news, egomaniacal buildings.
You can hear it but not see it.
Yeah.
Just a
Okay, give me a second.
This hope is out there, just wildly underreported. They discovered something extraordinary that under the
Hold on, we're going to start that again. Give me a second. This is
2026, a special.
hold on a sec. Sorry, this is hold on, I'm going to stop
Do you
that.
want me to talk and we can play it later? It's totally fine.
Talk from no, it should go on now. It's because I've got double screen on, that's why it's not liking it. Hold on a second. Now I can do it. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hoping this might work.
Ops storytelling team turned their backs on endless bad news, egomaniacal billionaires and went looking for something better. With just a microphone and a belief that hope is out there, just wildly underreported, they discovered something extraordinary that under the radar of mainstream news, crack teams of ordinary communities are already fixing our biggest problems: energy, food, housing, democracy done properly, affordably, and sustainably. If you've had enough of doom scrolling, if you want to know how everyday people are already building a world that works, maybe if there's a creeping part of you fed up and thinking, surely we can do better than this, maybe you should listen to Screw This, Let's Try Something Else. Featuring, which one's yours, Mark? That one there. It comes up in a kit, if you like. Like IKEA, you bolted it together. You got it. And how do you behave differently as landlords?
We're not landlords. We are custodians of these homes as community assets in perpetuity.
And if you've got a nation of people that care, and you've got a nation of farmers that want to produce great food, you've got everything you need to make it work.
Through the headlines, these were real stories of real people making a real future at work. The stories real people wanted to hear. The results? 12 weeks on Apple's recommended page in the UK, Ireland, and Canada. Coverage in The Guardian, The Daily Mirror, The Express, The Star, The Radio Times, The Food Magazine, and 14 local papers nationally. 25,000 downloads, 400,000 social media engagement, top 5% of new podcasts, 5-star reviews, and the public loved it. Nice words won't build a future. So they also created a postcode search tool so listeners can find 5 examples of powerful change-making collective action within 5 miles of their front door and get active. And over 15% of listeners did just that. Because it turns out anyone can come together to change the world, including your neighbor, your plumber, your friends, your kid's teacher, Gene down the road, even this guy. If you feel a complete loss of faith in the world, if you're worried that everything is going to hell in a handcuff, if you need to be reminded how epically brilliant people can be when they come together, and to hell with the regular news, you need Screw This, Let's Try Something Else, wherever you get your podcasts.
So there you go. That is a silly video about what we've done. Why have we done this? So the project has come out of a wider project that we've created in the last 4 or 5 years called Antidote. And where that came from was this feeling that we exist in this moment where we recognize everything is broken and we have limited capacity to create change. And I've been an activist, I've done protesting, I've worked with businesses to try and change things. And really what I was feeling was there are real blocks there. We are trapped in a system economically and politically where it's difficult. You can make huge impactful campaigns and not a lot changes. And then when you look around the country, the most exciting leadership is coming in communities. People are coming together and creating big change where they are. And that change, if spread everywhere, could literally be transformational, far more and far more quickly than what we're seeing coming out of government and what we're seeing coming out of corporations. And so it felt like we really needed to tell these stories and feel and hear what that future, what those projects are, where they are, and what that future that they could unlock could look like. A lot of this is based on this idea that we're trying to understand and learn different ways that we can use story to help us re-find our agency. So fundamentally, what Antidote is trying to do is work out how we reshape stories to help us all believe that collectively we can change the world. And that might sound bombastic and crazy, but I guess from my perspective, we now exist in a system where 99.9% of people aren't served by the system we're in, and yet somehow we don't feel we can change it. And so it's a question of alignment and re-finding each other and finding ways to tell these stories in unifying ways that bring us together. So we tried 4 years ago telling collective action stories, and it didn't work. Because we came up against two things. One was we tend to tell these stories in ways that are not unifying, that we focus on issues, not on the human things that bring us together. So climate is to many people an issue, and if they can't feed their kids, they may not feel they have the capacity to go and do climate action. But working together on food or energy or housing or decision making are things that bring us together. We all need those things. And so we try and focus on stories that are unifying and bring us together around the essential things we all need as humans. And then we also face this problem that we're all stuck in this individualized world, and we think that these collective local stories are small and they can't create big change. But if you look back through history, most big change has come from ordinary groups of people inventing something that worked where they are. And then politicians, we often look to politicians to fix stuff, but historically politicians haven't really come up with loads of ideas. They tend to spread ideas that have come from something demonstrated somewhere locally. So really what we're trying to do with all of this is find a way to tell those stories in a way that gives belief and empowerment and agency to ordinary people, both in what we tell, how we tell it, to really shine a light on the power that we have when we work locally, and help us see how we can get involved so that these aren't stories that are coming from crazily skilled people with loads of background that we don't have. They are ordinary people working together in their place in a way that loads of us can do. So that's the background to it. I'm now going to hand over to Jess, because Jess and I have known each other for a long time, and Jess and I worked very closely on this. So Jess got involved, and I'm going to hand over to you, Jess.
I'm a TV and podcast producer, and I had sort of been going through running the mill of being a TV and podcast producer, jumping from gig to gig for many years. And I think that you come to a point in your life where, for me at least, my kids were just that little bit older. And I kind of come out of the total chaos of like sleep deprivation and like survival and trying to, make sure everyone's fed and get to bed on time. And then when you come out of that, you sort of think, my kids are 7 and 10, by the way, now. When you come out of that, you kind of think, oh, I really want to do something with my experience that's meaningful. And as Matt said, we've known each other a long time. And when I saw he was kind of kickstarting this project, I got in touch with him and said, let's chat, because I feel like we could do something here. What Matt was building really, really appealed to me, because and why I sort of really wanted to get involved was because he was championing an alternative to what was filling my head. I think a lot of us are thinking, and what is our kids' future going to be like? And it's kind of like, we're going to have to fight fascism. They're going to have to deal with AI. Are they going to have a job? There's going to be a climate breakdown. And you kind of imagine your kids navigating that, and you get really, really, it becomes so overwhelming that you sort of turn away from it. You can't handle the thought of it. And the stories that Matt was starting to tell at that point on social media were presenting a really different way forward. It was ordinary people who had agency and worked together. And I think, maybe this was something that kind of came up a bit later, but they bridge divides. And we're going to talk a lot more about that over the next sort of 15 minutes or so. But that more hopeful future where we could all actually do something instead of wait for things to be done to us was really appealing to me. So we started talking about what we could do and what we could do sort of beyond the social media. And the idea of a podcast came up. And that's kind of where we were. But it was really based around the kind of around action and agency, which I know is something that Mothers Can is very focused on as well.
And a lot of this is based on, I guess, two main thoughts. One is that we've spent a lot of time in the climate and social change movement talking about problems, talking about what's wrong, why we're here. And that is kind of useful. But we don't spend enough time talking about where we're trying to get, the world we're trying to create, and what that could be like, and how we get there. So this visioning of where we're trying to go and how we're going to get there feels really underserved. Like, not, we just don't do it enough. And the second one is the fact that we, oh God, I forgot what I was going to say. um, the the fact we're social creatures, we spend a lot of time telling each other what to do when actually we kind of copy each other. We act when we see other people act, and so that felt really key. That we were trying to find a way to stop telling each other what to do and start showing each other what other people like us were already doing, on the basis that that's how we observe real behavior change happens. Like, you don't buy an iPhone because you're told to buy an iPhone. And in fact, there's lots of evidence that you have to get shown adverts quite a lot of times before you actually do anything. You normally buy an iPhone because your mate buys an iPhone, and then their mate, and then suddenly all your mates have got an iPhone, and then suddenly you're like, oh, maybe I'll buy an iPhone. Like, it's a slow and a social drip feed. And so it feels really important in this moment that we don't just tell each other what to do, don't just talk to each other about problems, but we hear about what other people like us are doing to solve things, and what benefit they're getting. So a huge amount of the thinking behind this is about showing, not telling, showing what other people like us are doing, and letting them tell us the benefits they're getting, so that we as the storytellers get out of the way. We're not preaching, we're not prescribing, we're not dictating or telling you things. We are just surfacing, in hopefully in an empowering and exciting and joyful way, the stuff that's going on that gives us some sense of what we could all do to move forward.
And I think so. Once we got the podcast up and going, we partnered with a media brand, Immediate, who do all the BBC brands, and we started traveling around the country. And the first place we went to was Lawrence Weston, and that is a place where, you know, exactly what Matt's talking about. You're kind of, it's before I go into detail about what we found there, I just want to give a quick rundown for anyone who hasn't listened to the podcast, because if you have, you'll remember this rundown. But Lawrence Weston is a pretty deprived community just outside of Bristol. They were in the middle of a food desert. They asked the council to use the site of an old college that had just closed in their community to build a supermarket, and the council said, oh yeah, no, sorry, no supermarkets are interested. So they were like, so they gave up. No, they didn't give up. They went to an independent retail expert who went to all the supermarkets and asked, would you be interested in opening a supermarket here? And 5 supermarkets came back. So they took that back to the council, and they were like, yeah, so I think there are 5 supermarkets interested. They then got themselves on the board of the interviews for these supermarkets and made sure that the supermarket had good wages, had a really good food option, and wasn't super expensive. They then, after that sort of great success, decided that they were going to change all the planning laws in their area, and they set up something called a neighbourhood development plan, which is something worth looking up, because it has a sort of major impact. It basically meant that any new houses in the area had to have solar panels and heat pumps to reduce the bills. They started a bus route to take people to work where there hadn't been one. And after a couple of years, the council was like, oh, it seems like you do need a bus route, and actually put the bus route in after them. They did training for residents to get into work. They built a £2.5 million community centre, and they've set up like 1,000 clubs and gardening and allotments and all that sort of stuff. And then they're like, that's not enough. We're going to build a wind turbine. So they built a wind turbine, which generates enough money. It actually self-funds the organisation. So it generates about 100 grand a year, and they've got a mortgage style system. So in a few years' time, it'll be generating, double that. And Lawrence Weston was a really important starting point for us, and it was always going to be the first episode. We knew that from the beginning, and part of the reason is because Lawrence Weston is kind of like a gateway drug to this kind of community work. And a lot of that is down to Mark Pepper, who heads up the organisation there. He just is not what you'd expect. So he is not he doesn't scream activist, he doesn't scream lefty, he's just completely no nonsense, common sense, and you genuinely have no idea how he'd vote or like anything like that. And for us, kind of putting these stories together, that was such an important point, because we wanted anyone listening to see themselves as see themselves being able to do what the residents of Lawrence Weston did, and we wanted that to be true across the political spectrum. These were stories about bringing people together. They're not stories about dividing people. So when we wrote the series, a lot of people were surprised, but genuinely, Matt and I had so many conversations about, okay, do you think a reform voter would be, if we felt like we were crossing the line, we wanted it to appeal to literally everybody. And we understand that not a lot of reform voters are probably going to listen to it, but we wanted it to be accessible to everybody. And that's a kind of core thing for us moving forward as well, in terms of what we're developing TV and all that kind of stuff. And in terms of climate, that shoot in Lawrence Weston was like a huge aha moment. I don't know how much of an aha moment it was for Matt. He might have already been on this train, but for me it was, and it was very related to climate. As I mentioned, Lawrence West have done tons of work, around planning. So they changed the planning things. The solar and the heat pumps had to go on the new houses. And Mariam, who's the co-host, asked Mark, like, how did you get into the environment? Because it genuinely was a question when you meet Mark. It's like, how does this relate? And Mark said this thing, which I'm not going to say in any way as well as he did, which is, people here don't care about the ice caps melting when the ice in their freezer is melting because they can't afford the electricity. And that was like oh my God, finally, it's like, 1,000 light bulbs go off. Like, at once you can see and understand why it's so hard for people to relate to climate change, because climate change is this big, seemingly unsolvable thing. And to be honest, I struggle to relate to it. Like, I worry about it, but I don't know what to do about it. And that may be something that, that other people relate to anyway. I mean, now I have a better sense of what to do because I feel like this is more of a roadmap. But at the time, I definitely felt that case. But once you start to think about how people actually feel, you can start to find common ground. And that actually is as well a huge power of storytelling. And that's, one of the things about storytelling that it allows you to feel how other people feel. Because actually, practically on the ground, addressing climate change and the cost of living go hand in hand. So, and Mark said this, he's like, community development and climate action are one and the same. He knew that this was like, the solar panels and the heat pumps reduce your bills. It's as Mark would say, common sense, And I think that one of the key things that we took from that is that we've all spent so long being divisive, and it's not just on the right. We spent time being divisive on the left as well. We've forgotten to empathize with people. So, last weekend, the sort of hate marches, we can reject the hate, and we should, but we also need to try and understand why people feel that way, why people feel left behind. You can't get a house because of the housing crisis. You don't have enough income to feel safe. And once you understand that, then we can start to build something that's about letting people in and being inclusive and making a safe space for everyone, whatever your views.
And that's really key. And that's part of, so this way we've tried to do the storytelling is built out of compassion, empathy, and care. That if we are in communities, increasingly we're in communities where people are struggling. We're all struggling. Even people who have reasonable amounts of money, their food bills have gone up, their butter's 20% smaller, their bills are more of a weight on them than they were. So in a way, we're kind of entering this period where, because systems are starting to collapse and the cost of living crisis is rising, we are not all in the same boat. People on the breadline are in a much harder boat, but we can all feel the same signals coming. And that sense of kindness and care, which is that, we could ask people to do more climate action, but in reality, if somebody can't pay their food bill and we are asking them to do climate action, that is not a very kind thing. What we should be doing is going and standing next to them and going, how can we help you pay your food bill? How can we work together to build a food system in which we can all afford our food, and that food is healthy, and it's the thing that is exciting for me in work is that it really shows you that everybody wants the same thing. Apart from maybe a tiny number of people on that hate march, in general, even people voting for reform are just trying to get by and provide safety and security for the people they love. And that when you come together around those things and realize that there are no examples of community action we've come across in doing this work for 5 years where communities have come together and done anything other than make a renewable energy project when they want an energy system. There are no fossil fuel powered community energy projects. So we don't need to tell people to do that. Similarly, nobody coming together to work on food collectively is going, oh, let's fly in grapes from South America. Like they all do local food. They all learn how to grow and reconnect. Lawrence Weston, we didn't really put this massively in the podcast, but they're teaching each other. They've hired 2 allotments and they're teaching each other how to grow food because they don't like the fact that the growing number of takeaways on the high street, little part of Bristol, are giving them all heart attacks. And they're seeing the connection between eating unhealthy food that might be cheap, but it's killing them. So they're like, let's learn to let's teach our people where our food comes from in solidarity with the people. And so a lot of these stories disprove a lot of these things that are often bandied around, that wanting to care about good food is a middle class privilege. Everybody cares about good food. Everybody cares about affordable energy bills. And when we start working together around those things, we find that there's a lot more traction to work together and create big change than we might think if we keep ourselves stuck in silos. But I'm going to move on now to like, how do you do it? Like, so one of the things we want to get across here is like, we're trying to also show how accessible this is by helping people not only get inspired, but find things near them. So it said in the video, I don't know how easy it was to hear, but like that there's a postcode search tool so you can find things near you. We've built that's beta version. So if you've used it and it's not worked perfectly, I apologize. We're improving it all the time. But the point is we're trying to help you find stuff to get involved with. And in episode 6, if you've got that far, we go through the 5 tips that everyone has talked about how you do this. So I'm going to quickly run through those. The 5 tips we've identified, and we created these between ourselves and with John Alexander and some other people that had all worked on these kind of projects. So they're our summary of what we've observed looking at like dozens of these projects across the UK. The first step is find other people. But the thing that's exciting about this is you don't need to find, like sometimes when we're doing petitions, you don't need to find like 1 million or 100,000 other people. Normally it's between 5 and 12 people in the core team of any project like this. So, and the first thing, you don't need to necessarily find people even who care about a specific issue. You just need to find people in your area who are a bit fed up and want to do something to improve the area. A core team of 5 to 12 can then catalyze a conversation. Step 2, and this is really quite profound when you look at what everybody we found that's most successful has done. Step 2 is ask what everyone wants. It doesn't really work as well when you kind of think you have an answer and you try and put that on the local area. It's amazing when you look at the things that are working, that the length that has been gone to ask thousands of people is profound. In Lawrence Weston, they knocked on 3,500 doors. In Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland, they delivered 10,000 postcards. And they did it during lockdown when people wanted to get their steps in. So they just got people to meet up. They had to socially distance. They took bundles of postcards and everybody went out and did a 40-minute walk and got their steps in, until over a week or so they delivered 10,000 postcards. You know, Shropshire, Ford Hall Farm have 8,000 members who've collectively bought the farm, and they can all attend the AGM and vote every year. So you've got this huge input of desire of what people want. And even if not everyone answers or takes part, the fact that people feel like they've had an ability to have a say is really key in them being able to take this collective action forward, because you're building a sense of accessibility and a mandate from people around the area. The third thing is build your vision and values. And this one is quite like there's always going to be problems. We are not making out that this work is easy. In fact, a lot of it's really hard. And I can see some questions in the thing about funding and others, and we'll come to that. But the thing that tends to keep communities together is having an agreement on how they want to do what they're doing. And that could be, we want to do it with a regenerative approach to economics, or we want to do it in a way that keeps money local, or we want to do it in a way that thinks about accessibility for everyone, but there'll be values that people write down. And it's amazing how much work that successful communities do relatively early on, like almost before they've really got going, to agree between each other, because this can sometimes be groups of disparate people and diverse people, what they are agreeing are the ways they're going to do it. The fourth thing is decide on a thing to do. And it's notable that that comes quite late. Like there's a lot of exploration first of what do we want to do roughly? We want to improve the area. Who are we going to do it with? Let's ask everyone what they want and find the kind of general vibe in the area. And so, but ultimately you do get to a point that we call this step 4, where you decide exactly what you're going to do. And then the fifth thing is trust yourselves, that none of the people that we profiled knew what they were doing. They had no training. They had no expertise, really. They might have brought in people who had knowledge on specific areas, but everybody says over and over again, we didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea how to pull it off. We didn't even believe it was necessarily possible, but we thought we'd try it anyway. And that knowledge that is what it takes, that not knowing and trying anyway is the pattern. So if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel scared, if you feel vulnerable, that's normal. That's what everyone's felt. None of them, they all say, we put on a crowdfunder, for example, we had no idea if it was going to work. We didn't know. Like Lee in Carrick says, I didn't know there was £25,000 in the local area to fund a greengrocer. Everybody told me it was a probable no, but we thought we'd give it a go anyway. So all of those feelings of lack of certainty are normal. I'm going to stop there. The main point is, oh, Jess, did you want to say anything about your?
Yeah. So I'm gonna reveal my own sort of little journey with this. So after making the podcast, writing these series, meeting the communities, and especially producing and writing episode 6, because it clarifies so many things, I started to kind of look around me, and I live on a new estate. I just moved to a new estate, and there's a very sad looking sort of community garden with sort of unfilled raised beds in it, and that no one had done anything with. And I kind of I'm very busy, and I kind of made a big sign, was like, can't really be a hypocrite about this. So I reached out on the community WhatsApp, which I hadn't joined so far because I'm not a big fan of like massive community WhatsApps, and said, does anyone want to do anything with the community garden? And I was shot down within about 5 seconds by 2 women who were just like, you can't do that. You have to ask permission. You have to do. Luckily, a number of other people kind of came in and was quite positive about it, and also then contacted me and said, thanks for saying something that isn't about cat poo on the community WhatsApp. And the next day, 50 people joined a community garden WhatsApp. And about 6 or 7 of those people wanted to be part of a core group. And genuinely, we have just followed all of the 6 steps. I mean, and I haven't really even told because I don't want these people that I'm working with to feel sort of massively manipulated by like that, oh, I've got a podcast and I'm just following it. I've talked a little bit about what we're doing, and I've said, look, I feel like it's important that we have some vision and values about what we're going around. But we basically just followed that. We put out a survey. We made sure that it went to all the social housing in the development and all of the homeowners, and we got survey results back. Not tons of people, but we got like 40 responses, and we had a market research person on the estate put that together. And we just have started running community events. 60 people turn up. This is not like an energy project, so there's probably people here who are doing something much more kind of meaningful than what we're doing. But I still see this as much more than a few nice flowers or growing a bit of food. I know that what we're doing is building a community muscle and a togetherness, and that the land itself is also resilience in an uncertain world. And one of the big things for me was recently someone just started their own thing, like it's just the fact that we had done this. Someone just was like, oh, I want to do a mum and baby group. Okay, great. And then someone was like, oh, I really want to make this grass verge into a meadow. Will my neighbours help me? And it had nothing to do with us, but it just sparked off these various different things. And I think that's the power of it. And I just want to end by saying this, which is, Matt has always said, I'd stake my kids' future on this. And over the year and a bit or whatever that we've been working together, I agree with that. I've come to really believe that. And I think our kids will face a lot of the scary stuff that I mentioned earlier on. But the difference is we don't have to passively accept it. And if we start the process of learning the tools that we need to build something better now, then the future for them could be more hopeful.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And what an inspiring end, because I think actually just knowing that you've taken what you've learned and you've gone and really made something from it. And as I say, as Lindsay said at the beginning, this never could have been a podcast that was so in line with what we do at Mothers Can. I mean, I'd just like to say I was part of the group that started Mothers Can. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea. We just thought we'd have a try. We'd just have a try. And I think that's what this is all about. We call it Lindsay mentioned about the anxiety to action course that we do. We talk about getting on the bike, and you just get on the bike. You're going to fall off, but you just fall off, get back on again, and just keep at it. But it's super, super inspiring. We've just got a short amount of time for questions, and as you can see in the chat, there's lots of questions. Some of them, so I do them justice, I'm going to ask the person who asked it to come off mute to actually ask it, if that's okay. First one I think I can probably just about cover, and that's sort of the financial side of it. Sometimes we get a bit stuck in the fact that, oh my God, it takes money, it takes this, how do you do that? And I wondered if you got any sense from the people that you will work it with, that you made the podcast with. I know you mentioned about crowdfunders, but were there other sort of financial and, anything that came across from you that you can feed back into that question?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of things, and they're not. There's a range, so I'm going to quickly go through a range. Like there is some of this that does require funding that's quite hard. So Josie in East Marsh United, and they've started buying back houses, so they needed quite a lot of money. She says I sat in my upstairs bedroom and I filled in funding applications for a year, but it did ultimately work. So like, it was hard and it was boring, but it did ultimately work. But people like Mark also, well, the Ford Hall Farm, who crowdfunded, they did classic crowdfunding, but they did that 20 years ago. So, and what's really important there is the story was really good. So I guess we are trying to teach communities the storytelling approaches that we've learned that work to make these stories feeling exciting, because having a good ability to tell a story is part of how you make crowdfunding work. And they had a brilliant story, a brother and sister whose dad was getting really old and had his farm threatened to be bought out from under him by big agriculture, and they set up a crowdfunder to help ordinary people buy it back for people and community to manage in perpetuity. So that's a great story. Mark says some stuff in Lawrence Weston that I think is most useful in terms of this, which is that you do need money from outside, but it's much easier to get money when you start doing something, you have a vision and you've shown that you're already pulling towards something, and that is easier to get people to get excited and come in behind, whether those are philanthropists, whether those are foundations, whether it's the council. But it's much easier to have something in progress that is clear, has a vision and values, and has a direction, and then go, look, can you help with this? And people what he said a lot is people tend to come out of the woodwork and start either offering money or offering to help you find money, or because they want to back it because they can see a thing. So a lot of this is based around this theory that Audrey Tang in Taiwan expresses really clearly, which is demonstration rather than protest. If you're demonstrating the thing you want, it's easier to get other people excited by it. So it doesn't solve the funding thing, but it does make it a lot easier than if you're cold pitching an idea that hasn't happened yet. And you don't need loads of funding. And one other thing I'll say, because this is creative work that is demonstrating a world we want to live in, and therefore it has a bit more of a positive vibe and an exciting energy. A couple of people have told us stories about the silent person in the room that came to meetings for 2 years, nobody knew who they were, and then suddenly they turned out to be minted and put 100 grand on the table. And that sense that you are bringing people in who might quietly have access to other funds is also part of it. So those are a few different answers, and they don't solve the money problem, but the main point is money gets easier when you're doing something that is exciting that people can get behind.
One thing I'll just very quickly to add to that is it's amazing how much you can do without any money. So I think that's really, really important to say. Like, you really can do a lot without money. Like, this community garden, we have a landscape architect who's designed the garden for us, who just has done it, and we have a market research person. It's just, once you start reaching out to people and they get interested, you can start pulling people in, and then you do a PayPal pool for like a big, you don't have to start with the big thing. You can start with something small, and then once you've built that vision and values, you can keep on kind of building in little bits of funding here and there, and then go for the bigger thing.
Great advice. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Alice, who asked the next question. If Alice, do you mind coming off mute just to ask that question so I can just, because I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice.
Hello. Sorry, I'm not sure I will do it justice now either. Yeah, I met Matt a few weeks ago at a our house event, and we kind of half got into this question, and that's why I'm here basically, from following Matt and listening to the podcast. But yeah, I'm my work background is PR and comms, and I've basically given myself the ick about my own career. And so my question, I've seen a lot of vulnerable people and vulnerable communities asked to kind of serve up their story for the media, for a biased media, who it's again about extraction, like all of the systems and structures that we're trying to work against. It's that extraction of the story and what makes a good story. And yeah, I'm just incredibly cynical. And obviously, the space that you guys are working in terms of social media and being having a podcast and things is absolutely in that space that is that can be really problematic in those terms. And I just wonder how you kind of navigate that. And obviously, like hearing you speak, it's the values are there to do something differently, and for it not to be based on that model. But I just worry that things like this will end up being absorbed by those bigger structures and systems that are based on extraction, if that makes any sense.
It does. I've got three things to say on that. Three things we do to tackle it. The first one is we build complicity with communities. So we have a less is more approach to stories that we tell. What we found is that the thing that I said earlier, that you've got to find the unifying examples, and what Jess said earlier, we are trying to find the gateway drug examples that demonstrate that collectively we can create big change. It's actually better to have a small number of good examples than a large number of mediocre examples. And mediocre means not playing to unifying values, that you could tell it to, if we all picked an uncle or aunt, we could tell them the story. Like what we want is when I could pick any of your uncle and aunts, tell them the stories we filtered, and they would get them wherever they were politically, wherever they were. So rather than stories where it would be a bit more hit and miss. So there's a sense of finding the right examples that are going to bring us together. Because we're doing that, we want to really build complicity with those communities. So we put a lot of effort into that. We get to know the communities, we build trust. We're not just going in and hoovering their story. We have a process where we first of all listen to their story. We then write it according to the framework that we've built, but we then play it back to them. We then get them to approve that we've told their story correctly. Then we go and turn it into whatever we are, like in this case, a podcast, and then we play it back to them again and say, this is what we've made. Are you okay with it? So they always get sign off on every form of their story. So we're not doing, don't tell our story about us without us. So there's that trust thing. The second thing is about the media platforms which you've identified, and that there is a tension there, but I think we have to be pragmatic there. We looked, I think there's a platform called Deezer, which is a like more ethical podcast releasing platform. It has 2% of the users than Spotify. So we could make the best podcast in the world, but we're not going to get it to that many people if we put it out to a platform with only 2% of the listeners of Spotify. And actually, I think that figure's wrong. It's like hundreds of thousands of people. It's crazily small. So if you try and combine ethical storytelling and ethical distribution channels, you're really not going to reach enough people to change the world. And so I think we have to be pragmatic there. And that is personally something difficult. I left Spotify, got my whole family off Spotify, moved to Cobuzz, and then made a podcast with Immediate, who made us put it back on Spotify. So I do feel the tension. Like I'm only back on Spotify because of this podcast. But I also can't see, you could say the same about Instagram. You could say the same about any of the platforms we're putting content out on. But if we only put them out on the platforms that don't have that tension, we're not going to reach enough people. And the third thing I think is about story itself. Sometimes what we are really trying to explore, I hope, ultimately transcends these platforms, because we're not trying to learn how to tell stories that play to the algorithms of these platforms. We're trying to tell stories that speak to humans. And we have to learn how to do that. And we have to put ourselves out there in places where we're going to get told when we're wrong, and we can evolve quickly by exposing ourselves to lots of people and lots of criticism. And we've done that prior. Like we've been doing this 5 years, and we did 2 phases before we even went public. But that is important because I think sometimes if I'm being really brutally honest, and I've been on this journey, sometimes the reason we're not reaching people is because we're telling stories really badly. And there are two reasons for that. Some of the story structures we're following, like the hero's journey, are not helpful story structures. They're aggressive, they're violent, they're divisive, extractive story structures, and we all learn them as storytellers. So we have to let go of that. And then what do we replace it with? We've got to learn. And the other reason is sometimes we just tell stories that are a bit too boring. So we have to learn to tell them in a more exciting way. And all of that, if we can do that, we can empower ourselves to sometimes go back into those spaces with more empowerment. I had a meeting with the Onion Collective at lunchtime today because they are wary of exactly what you're saying, like that they've had PR done to them, but they've never known how they can make their story work in PR. And so we're currently doing a process working with them to explore what might that look like? What might a version of their story that's exciting enough to engage PR type outlets look like, but that was on their terms? So I'm going to stop there, but those are some thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that, just to say as well, the next stage of what we're doing, a massive part of that is training communities in how to tell their stories. So, like, I think, and also just to add to the thing, like, we have to, in order to change how people feel about this, we have to create a sea change, and that means that we do have to work with, I mean, we have said we're never working with Amazon. That's one thing that we're not going to do. But we do have to work with people on massive platforms where we're going to get lots and lots of views.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Can I just ask, are you guys, is the podcast a commercial model?
No.
Is it, so you're not sponsored or anything, or
no,
like...
in fact they put out ads on our first episode, and it ran the transcript for the first episode. I don't know if it's still up there, actually ran Kraft cheese, because we were just like, okay, well, maybe we'll cut out the very worst ones. So we'd already cut out fossil fuels and all that sort of stuff. And then the first one ran with like a Kraft cheese that was obviously in the States, and we were like, oh my God, we've actually got to take it off, because the next episode is about regenerative farming and how food, all that sort of stuff. So we took all ads off completely from it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. That's interesting, actually, because I know it's challenging, obviously, because it does cost money to make podcasts, and that's why you end up in this kind of circle of needing to take ads. I'm reading through the questions. There's a couple that I'm just going to combine because I'm just conscious of time, which is, I think there's a bit about how do the groups get going? Did you get a sense of that? And also, how do they maintain momentum? Did you, because when we hear the stories, it can feel like, yeah, it was amazing, we all came together and, whatever. But there must have been the moments where it's like, oh my God, that, but maybe there weren't. So anyway, combining those two questions.
there's definitely those moments, but it is amazing as soon as you start to reach out to other people, and especially people that are outside of your bubble, so in your local area. It's amazing how things open up, and I think it also goes in ebbs and flows. So it can, like Carrickfocus, actually, I think this is right, Matt, isn't it? That went really slowly. They didn't even become a CIC for a community interest corporation for like 2 or 3 years. They took it at their own pace, and I think that's really important. And I always think to myself about that, with what the crazy thing that I'm doing over there. Like I always think I'm not pushing anyone into anything. Like, we're doing it at our own pace. Everyone's busy. If you can't come for a couple of months, or if only 3 people turn up to one meeting, it's fine. It'll go in ebbs and flows. And so I think it's trusting in the process, and also trusting that when you're doing something positive, people get excited, and that may sort of shift and change over time, and people may be more excited at one point and less excited at another, but it will eventually sort of go somewhere. And I think not pushing it too hard is actually a really important thing. And then the other thing I would say is that a lot of the communities that we went to, they're at a point where probably none of us in this room are, which is that it was a necessity. Like, if you go to East Marsh United in Grimsby, it's one of the hardest places I've ever been, right? Like, either they lose their entire community or they do something about it. And so that's the people who are really sort of pushing at the edges and being radical are the people who need to do that. And we can then come in and say that can be done. If they can do it, we can do it.
And
That is incredibly inspiring. Matt, go on, sorry.
And to answer your question about where they start, it's kind of surprising how many of things start over food or drink.
Yeah,
A couple of people
it's true.
have a pint, have
Just
a
go
cup
turn
of
it around.
tea, go for a coffee, have a meal, cooking food together as the beginning process. Like the normal thing after the food, drink, coffee is like collectively cook a meal, and that continues to be a key thing. Everywhere we've been, they all eat together
Yeah.
regularly.
Always have cake. Always
Um,
have cake available.
and and then tag teaming it like a thing building on what Jess said is that the benefit of being a team, having a small team, is that you can have time out. Like
Yeah.
people hit hurdles, they hit close to burnout, and they go, I just need a few months off. And there's enough people within a small team to be like, fine, have a few months off, come back when you're ready. And that kept coming up and has always come up when we've had these conversations.
That's really good. I think there is that thing of like being able to always keep the door open, because we
Yeah.
always, and it can be hard when you're, I mean, it's so hard when you're running a group to think, and you can take it personally and think actually people should be able to come in and it should be a bit fluid, and the obligation is to the task, not to the people necessarily. There is a question that I think probably everyone is thinking here is will there be a series 2?
We are exploring it, but we haven't got funding yet. But we've got one more episode we're definitely making. There's one more we might make after that. We haven't got funding for a proper series 2 yet. But we're doing two things. We're trying to make more episodes of the podcast. We're also trying to make a big social media campaign and we're talking to people about TV. So we're trying to also use the podcast to reach platforms where even more people will see it. So we're doing both those things. But the positive thing is there's huge appetite. It's always just about finding the funding, but we are in a process and it's looking positive. So we will try.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Go on. Sorry, Jess, I just interrupted you.
No, like with this, I think that we would love to make a few more, but as Matt says, we're also just really looking to expand out and build on the audience that we have from the podcast and expand out from there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I know you're going to stay on for a few minutes. We're just going to, it's been amazing. It's been, really, it's so inspiring. And I think what I said to you, well, Matt, I texted you to say I was listening to this at the same time as running our anxiety to action course, and I was just like, oh my God, I've got to use that as an example. I've got to use this as an example. It was because a lot of this is about the way that we teach, and sometimes it can be quite difficult to think, how do you actually get going? And at Mothers Can, as Lindsay said, we teach mums really about community organising skills, which is what these people are all doing. They might not realising it, but it's all about building relational power, and that is what the Anxiety to Action course is all about. So if you are listening to this and thinking, I really want to do this, but you're thinking, I'm not quite sure how to get started, then the Anxiety to Action course could be something that you want to have a look at. And on that, I'd just like to invite Emma to come and I was just going to ask. So Emma we run this course 2 times a year. It is a 5-week course that's 2 hours a week, and we have. And it's a cohort of mums that come together, and it's all quite relaxed because we're all mums. We all know what it's like to be busy mums. We bring these mums together. So first of all, there's this incredible cohort that all begin to support and get a lot from each other in terms of building this kind of like cohort mentality of like, what am I going to do? And we teach kind of as I say, organising skills, which is a lot around building relational power, then going on to listen, and it's kind of like how you make impactful change. So Emma was on our last course, so we had a cohort that finished earlier this year. We then have another cohort that will be running in October, which starts on the 6th of October. I'm sure Lindsay has just put the link into the chat again. So Emma, it would be really lovely to hear from you in terms of, how did you find the course? What brought you to the course?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. Yeah, so I was introduced to the course via one of the kind of many mum groups that I'm in. It was sent in as a link and it really just piqued my interest, you know. I think like probably so many of us, I am very busy in my day to day. I've got two young kids, I've got a dog, I've got my husband, friends, busy job, everything. But I am very much someone that wants to get involved in community action, in climate action, but just never really knowing where to start and what to do. And I've always kind of done my bits personally. Um, but yeah, not really knowing where to start. And I saw the course and I thought this looks really interesting. It looks great. So I'll give it a go. I kind of signed up thinking, oh, I'm sure there's people who are much more relevant for this course, but I was really excited to get to take part in it. And yeah, like I said, it felt like just a really good kind of first step to get out of that, like my own head in a way. You know, I think, again, like many of us, there is so much anxiety around climate and not really knowing where to start because it feels so big. So I kind of hate moaning about things and not trying to do something about it. So I was like, let's just try this, see what I get out of it. And at the very least, I'll probably learn something and I will probably meet really interesting people. And you know, that's exciting. And then I think kind of finally, like I said, I've got two young girls. And for me, I want to make sure that when I have these conversations with them now, as they grow up and as they get older, I want to make sure that I have actually done something as opposed to just said things. So that's been really important for me too in the space.
Okay, and what, you talked about what getting something out of the course. What did you get out of the course?
Yeah, I think I got a lot from it. You know, it was 5, 6 weeks and the kind of 2 hours a week. So there was so much that I think we all got from it. From myself personally, I think that connection to like-minded people, which I think we kind of has come up a few times tonight, was really reassuring. You know, like I said, that this topic can feel quite overwhelming. So to know there's other people who are feeling that same way and also looking at their solutions. I think it was really interesting to meet people from all walks of life, you know, and really know that, you know, Jess kind of touched on this. This isn't necessarily something that is specific to a certain party or a certain political system. Like these are things that could interest everyone in all ways. So that was really exciting. I think practical guidance, you know, from you, Sophie and Lindsay, just those first steps we can take, the kind of practical things around doing one-to-ones, around exploring our self-interest, how to have those conversations, how to frame those conversations, you know, making it act like really things that we could put into practice in our day-to-day, as opposed to just kind of inspiration-led conversations, but then feeling a bit like, but now what? For me, I think it also was a time to reflect and, you know, think about perspective. We do our stick mums. So again, if anyone has done the course, you'll know what that is. If you're going to do it, it'll come up at some point. So I think really thinking about what I care about, it was kind of empowering as well in a way, and allows you to really focus. And then I think as well, what was quite nice, it challenged me too. You know, my background is not in this space. I worked in fashion for a really long time, and I always kind of grappled with that because I've always been really interested in climate and protection. And yeah, I just struggled with that. So kind of taking my time and attention, which I think are probably two of the most valuable things any of us has, and being able to look at how I can take all of the learnings from the course and bring that forward. And I would say as well, the course is delivered in such a low pressure way, which is really nice. You know, we definitely all, I think, came away wanting to do something and feeling inspired, but it didn't feel pressured because the reality is we are busy mums, but it felt empowering more than anything else.
Well, that's really good to hear because that's kind of the intention of the course. So
But
that's fantastic. And what have you done differently since? What have you? How's it? Yeah. Just give us some thoughts.
yeah,
What's led to?
yeah, you know what? I was thinking about this recently about that kind of shift. And I mean, my husband probably laughs at me because now when we go out, I think I feel a little bit braver in the space, which is quite nice. So I'm very willing to kind of have conversations that maybe I wouldn't have had before and don't feel like I need to have all the knowledge to have those conversations. You can go into something with such an open mind, but not a ton of information and just have that curiosity. And that's been really nice. And an example, we did a tree planting day with my daughter's school recently, and there was a guy, a volunteer leading it, who spends a lot of time in the park, who plants trees in our area, and kind of went up. I was like, give me your number. What do you do? This is amazing. Like, let's chat. And I probably wouldn't have done that before, but I was like, this is great. Like, it's great to meet people in the area who are doing this stuff. I'm stopping to read the local notice boards in coffee shops and in the library. I want to see what people are doing and what's going on in the area. I'm chatting to my neighbors more. I mean, I was very inspired by the leafleting that went on, that was mentioned in the podcast. And I was like, how 3,500 house could I do that? So what I have started with is myself and my daughter leafleted every house on our road, and we've encouraged lots more people to join our local WhatsApp group, and really small things like that. Just not being afraid to do it, but doing that with the people on my road, like not kind of trying to take this stuff on my own, but reaching out to people, having conversations, and not being afraid to send the message and saying, would anyone want to chat about this? And if no one replies, fine. It's not the end of the world. Like, I'm not going to die on the spot or burst into flames. Like, it's okay. But that's led to some really nice conversations with people in my area, and hearing about what they're focused on. And so yeah, it's just been really nice. And I have to say, I feel I'm really kind of proud, I think, of how I've reframed my place in the space. Even if it's only something small for now, I'm really hopeful that it will grow into something bigger. But that kind of bravery and pride were just really nice outcomes of the course.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say that might encourage? Because there are lots of people on this course on this call who've done the course and then obviously come part of the network. Just so explain, you don't have to do the course to become part of the network. We welcome anybody, anybody who wants to know more in the space and join our training. Because we do kind of training sessions 3 times a year on organising skills, but it's just a really good kind of introduction to kind of getting people going, and also like getting a shared language, so we all kind of understand what we're talking about. So as I say, you don't have to do the course, but it just helps to then kind of be able to move forward in this space. Is there anything else you want to you want to say, Emma, about the course, and anything that that might inspire somebody on this call to actually sign up?
Yeah, I think it's a commitment, but it feels good. It feels good to connect with people every week who feel the same as you do, to kind of take yourself out of your day to day in a way. It's very easy to just get bogged down with daily life sometimes. So it was nice to spend that time chatting and thinking a bit bigger, and then feeling refreshed from those conversations. Um, yeah, I think it's just go for it. It's a good time. You won't regret it. You'll come away with something positive. And coming away even just with the podcast, which by the way I share with everyone, because I just think it's so amazing, and I really hope you guys get the funding for the next episodes, the TV shows. I'll be telling everyone because it really is so great. Like, it's just so amazing to hear examples of these things and to be exposed to that information in a world where like the news is so negative most days. To have positive conversations with people, even if that's just once a week, or on a great podcast, it's so worth it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, yes, and as I said at the beginning, it's so inspirational, this podcast. So, and if you could have written a podcast for us, this is it. So thank you. And we would normally go into breakout rooms now, but we're conscious of time, and we left the questions going longer because I think you had so many brilliant questions for Matt and Jess. So we're not going to go into breakout rooms now. But what would be really, really good is, if you have something you'd like to say now, in terms of you want to say, anything that's what we would call in the space is like a key takeaway, anything you kind of go like that's inspired you, you are more than welcome to put your hand up, come off mute and say something, or please do put something in the chat so that I can read it out. Because for us this has been an incredibly inspirational evening, and I hope it really has been for everyone on the call. How's everyone feeling? Anyone got something they'd like to reflect? I'm sure somebody from one of the Mothers Camp particularly would like to say something about what they've heard tonight. Or I'd like to see a hand up.
I don't mind saying something, Sophie, if gives others time to think.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think you've said it tonight, but also one of the key things I took from the podcast as well was about how climate action is local action and local development. And I think that was like a key thing for us to think about, because obviously we've come together around climate, but actually it is about, like you say, a lot of it relates to climate anyway. So I think it's just remembering that. yeah, that was one of my key takeaways from the podcast anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think at Mothers Can, we called ourselves Mothers Can because, it was around climate that we came together, and it was a desperate kind of anxiety about what we saw happening in front of us and not knowing what to do about it, and felt that we wanted to bring other mothers on this journey. And then what we realised, actually, you almost don't need the word climate in it, because anything that a mum who engages wants to do generally is good for the climate. So it's just, and really that seed could mean community, because I think that's the thing, is that mums become so embedded in their community by having a child that suddenly it's just that's what they want to improve, and that's where that's where you put effort in, which is fantastic. Anything else? Any other observations? Anything anybody would like to add before we finish? There's lots of hearts, and I know, and I'm also going to say that I'm aware that there was a couple more questions that we didn't get to, which I'm going to take off the chat. And then what we'll do is you'll get an email tomorrow just to kind of follow up with the recording, and I will I'll answer those questions in there, if that's all right with Matt and Jess. Carrie, do you want to come off mute and...
Hi, yeah, I was just thinking about the kind of like us all not being in the same boat analogy, and that as time goes on, it's going to become increasingly evident that there are things as communities that we need to take action on. So thank you so much for sort of empowering communities and showcasing what can be done, because I think it's going to be more and more obvious in all sorts of different fields of life what needs to be done, if that makes sense.
By the way, Matt, Jess, you're also more than welcome to come off mute and comment. Like, you don't know.
I think yeah, that's absolutely right. And actually, I mean, maybe we're sort of slightly in our algorithmic bubble. It seems to be coming more like because no one can speak about objectivity anymore, but it seems to be that kind of thought is just really, we're on a wave, and that's a good thing.
I think also, and this is a slightly darker take, but we are aware we are playing with systems collapse, and ultimately whatever happens, the work we're trying to profile is the answer. Like, whereas some of the things we could do, like lobbying the government, etc., could be okay now, ultimately this work transcends all of that. Like, we are always going to be in community, and we're always going to need to come together around our essential needs. So the skill of practicing, learning, and trying now will work whatever happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good note to end on. Jess, Matt, thank you so much. Emma, thank you
Thanks for having us.
It's been thank you. Thanks for being here. It's been brilliant. And thank you to everybody who's joined today. It's fantastic to see these calls are like, I hope you feel buoyed coming up and you feel hope, because someone said to me the other day, action doesn't come from hope. Hope comes from action. So hear what we're saying today, and that's how you build hope. And hopefully those that we don't see regularly, we'll see you at the next one. Good night, everyone.
Perfect. All right. See you later,
Thanks a lot.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.